crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with 2 cards featuring Spellbinders. Spellbinders reached out and asked if I wanted to work with some of their products. Since I'm a fan of their products, like I already use them, I spend my own money on their products, I decided that that would be a fun opportunity, but they didn't ask me to make a video. I just decided to share it in video form because that's how I like to share. I am working with the Grateful stamp set and coordinating dies. When you purchase the rubber cling stamp set, you get the dies that cut out the pieces all in, sort of one package. But I will be combining it with some other Spellbinders products that I already owned and enjoyed. I stamped out a large sheet of the cheese and graters from the stamp set so that I could color a bunch up and make some cards. I am doing some really simple coloring on both the cheese and the grater. I'm using Y11, Y13, and Y00 to color the lighter cheese here. When I first colored the cheese, I colored it like a darker sort of cheddar color, but I realized, of course, it's supposed to be Swiss cheese since it has those little holes in it. So then I picked out some lighter colors for the second go round. And then to color all of the cheese graters, I decided to go with some C markers. These are the cool grays. I think that the cool grays are a great idea when you are coloring anything that looks metal. You don't need to own all of the Copic grays by any means, but I do personally like to have the C's and the W's. The C's are great for metal objects and things that have a sort of shiny look to them, whereas the warm grays are really good for most animals, although I do tend towards the C's for sea creatures because, again, that slickness of them. To create my shadows, I'm doing some really simple work. I'm using the C3 darkest color on all of the edges, and then I'm blending it out to the C1 and the C00. In retrospect, I realized that my C0 was quite dry. Sorry, in the middle of crafting, I realized it was quite dry. And when you are in the middle of a project, you can take your Copic refill and just dab a few dots, or a few drops of the refill onto your marker, but it's not a great long-term solution. So once I was finished filming, I would go back, I would take the chisel tip out, and I would drop more of the ink into the center of the marker. But being able to add a few drops really helps you to just finish something off quickly. If you feel like you don't have quite as much shadow as you would like, something I tend to do if I want to add a bit more contrast is to go back with my darkest color and reapply my shadows without blending them out, just to make them a little bit sharper and have that contrast, because once you blend them out, you lighten them, and so that's one last final go through with the darkest color can really add some dimension. So that's what I was doing just there. And the cheese graters have both a smiley face and not a smiley face, so you can pick which one you like better, or you could mask off the smiley face if that's not your style. I decided to make 2 different, I want to say backgrounds, but they don't cover the entire back of the card. They're just going to be a grounding element, but they are pretty large. And these are using the Kaleidoscope series of dies from Spellbinders. Like I said, they're kind of like background dies, but they're not as large as an entire A2 size card. They're just really big dies, and they have some really pretty patterns. I own 3 different ones, but today I'm going to use the Trapezoid motif and the wagon wheel to create the color on those backgrounds. Though instead of just using solid colored pattern paper, I'm going to create some of my own colored paper. This first one here is with Distress inks. So I just took some fossilized amber and squeezed lemonade distress oxides, although regular distress inks would work just as well. And I covered a piece of paper that was about the size of my die. So I kind of just measured it up with my die to make sure that I covered enough area. And then I'm going to add some Spellbinders adhesive behind the pattern paper. This Spellbinders adhesive is according to the packaging, not meant to work with the thin, like the wafer thin dies, such as the ones that I'm using, but I wanted to give it a go anyway and see how it worked out. I did find it did not cut all the way through. So while it did cut the paper, it did not cut all the way through the adhesive. Again, it's not meant to work with these dies. It's meant to work with a different, thicker set of dies, and so that's probably why. And I didn't count that against the product. You can't expect it to do what it says it doesn't do, kind of thing. But it worked out well for my purposes because I wanted to create an interesting background. And what that adhesive sheet essentially did was keep all of the little pieces inside of the die. And that can be a tricky thing to do, to get all of your adhesive in there, to get it covered with adhesive and to keep all of your pieces. So it made it really easy to create this background piece, but it kind of had this like embossed look. So if you don't have an adhesive that will essentially attach them for you, you could instead just emboss the die. And you use an embossing insert in your die cut machine instead of a cutting insert to achieve that look. But I was really happy with the textured background that it essentially created here. So I laid it down on my card and I trimmed off the extra. Then I am ready to add in my main focal panel, like where I'm going to put the stamped images from the stamp set. I use the "You Are Really Great" sentiment, and I put the cheese down flat, but I popped up the grater so that it had a little bit of dimension and interest there. Then I used my Y13, which was from the cheese coloring, to add the little details to the U, and that was it for my card. My second card here is very much the same, so I'll go through just a little bit of differences I made quickly. I started off with a piece of vellum, and I added some alcohol ink. You could do this on a glossy cardstock as well, or anything that's made to work with alcohol inks, but essentially alcohol inks work well with non-porous surfaces, so a standard piece of paper is not going to work well with alcohol inks. I chose vellum so that it would have a bit of interest, and the alcohol inks that I'm working with are HONEYCOMB, Dandelion, and Sunshine Yellow. Of course, it doesn't really matter. You take whatever yellows in your collection, just like with the distress inks, or if you didn't have distress inks, any other ink, dye ink you have would work out well. And of course, you could pick your favorite coloring medium to create a similar background. You could use watercolors and make something pretty similar. Just dropping watercolors onto paper, it just might be a bit lighter. Overall, I wanted to tend towards the yellow. I did find that the honeycomb was a bit, I believe it's the honeycomb, is a bit more orange than I was looking for. So I added more of the other colors to counteract that. Then I did the same thing as before. I put the Spellbinders adhesive sheet behind the die cut panel, and I pulled it off. It did not die cut through the adhesive, but at this point I was kind of depending on that. I wanted it to hold all of my pieces together and create this interesting textured background. So this time as I pulled off the adhesive sheet, not all of the little, so you can see it kind of cuts them apart, but not quite, which again is what I was going for at this point. And so I had to pick off some of those individual pieces of adhesive. I used a non-stick scissor to achieve that, just so that it wouldn't gum up my scissors. Although I will say that I find sometimes, since my scissors are a little bit older, I guess the non-stick has sort of worn away. But it's usually pretty easy to get the adhesive off if you start with a non-stick scissor versus a traditional scissor. I'm going to lay that down similar to the way that I did. So this is still adhesive, even though it didn't, the pieces didn't come apart. I still have essentially an adhesive sheet there. If you find that it's not strong enough, you are working, in this case, I am working with the vellum, and I've die cut things and made them really lumpy bumpy. So a bit of extra adhesive is probably a good idea, because anytime something is not flat anymore, it's more likely to stick up from adhesive. But I laid that down, and then I'm laying a very similar panel on top of it, and that's going to be it for both of my cards today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you some links in the video description below to the products that I use. They will be affiliate links, full disclosure there. And I'll leave you links to some other videos that I've made. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on my channel today. Have a great day. Bye.